Hi guys, so this is part 33 of Posted, and we are on page 347. And I want to go back one sentence because Wolf said, I just need to get away from the noise. Maybe a new school is the best thing for me. I nodded. I understood. Maybe a little. I didn't know how it felt to be Wolf, of course, but I knew about needing space. It was hard enough trying to figure out who you were, who you liked, what you believed in, what you were good at. Even harder with someone else telling you what you should or shouldn't be. And even if you did figure it out, you still had to summon the courage to actually be that person, regardless of what other people thought. Maybe a new school would be different. It wouldn't be too much worse, except it wouldn't have us. I'm sorry, I said. Sorry if I let you down, if I wasn't there all the time. You're here now, Wolf said matter-of-factly, ever the voice of reason. We counted on him for that. Maybe this was what he counted on me for just being there. I could do that. At least I could try. We stared across the room at each other for an eternity while I worked up the guts to say something emotional and blubbery and totally against the rules. Something cheeseball like, I'm with you every step of the way. Or one of those fortune cookie nuggets pulled directly from the Post-it still hanging from his locker. But Wolf saved me by standing up all of a sudden with a sly grin on his face, a look that I'm pretty certain he picked up from Rose. I haven't had dinner yet, he said. My parents have been so worried about my emotional well-being that they kind of forgot to feed me. You hungry? My stomach rumbled, power of suggestion. If you're asking if I want you to try heating something in the microwave again, I'm going to have to go with no. Burning the house down seemed like it might just push the whole Thompson family right over the edge. I was thinking ice cream, actually. Give Rose and Dee Dee a call. Make my mom take us out. Mr. Twisties? I grinned and nodded. I couldn't have said it better myself. The next day, Wolf came to empty out his locker, well after dismissal so as not to attract too much attention. We were with him, me, Dee Dee, and Rose. His mother was in the principal's office filling out the necessary paperwork required for his withdrawal from BMS. It was official. He really wasn't coming back. I'm sure the big ham was serving her apologies and promises on a platter, anything to get Wolf to stay and not to turn into an even bigger deal than it already was. But for once, Wolf's parents agreed on something. Brenton Middle School wasn't the best place for their son. When Wolf saw his locker, he froze. It was completely covered now. Every inch, the messages climbing up onto the wall above it. The day it happened, kids kept coming, adding to the ever-growing pile, making a mountain of notes, some stacked on top of each other, some so that by the last bell it looked like a paper blanket skirting the ground, a waterfall of words. So many notes, more it seemed, than there were even students in the school. Even now, the lockers still smelled vaguely of new paint, though it was probably just my imagination. Rose and I stood on either side of Wolf, propping him up. He was getting good at that. It's pretty incredible, Dee Dee said, don't you think? Wolf didn't respond. Maybe he couldn't find the words. Didn't matter. He had plenty to choose from. He quickly ran his fingers over the notes, tapping them gently, as if he found some kind of melody there, a secret song that only he could hear. I wasn't sure he was even reading them, but then I saw him smile. He must have gotten to the I think you're hot. You can take them, I said. Pretty sure they were all meant for you. Wolf shook his head. Nah, I think the longer they stay up, the better. He dropped his hands and stepped back. His voice cracked a little. It's crazy. I don't even know this many people. I bet half of them barely even knew I existed. He leaned over and settled his head on Rose's shoulder, and we stood like that for a minute or two. I realized this was the last time I would ever meet Wolf at his locker, and my heart started to ache. Come on, Rose said. Let's get your stuff, get out of this place, and go do something fun. Wolf nodded solemnly, carefully opened his locker so as to not knock any of the notes free. It was practically empty inside already. His math textbook, a magnetic mirror, an empty bottle of Coke, and a BMS sweatshirt that he might never wear again. And at the bottom, one last note that had been folded into an origami fish and shoved through the slats. I wonder who that could be from, I said. Rose smiled knowingly. I didn't write it, if that's what you're implying, she said. I actually found it stuck to my locker the day of the gauntlet. I don't know who wrote it, actually, but it seemed like good advice, so I stuffed it in here for you. Wolf crouched down and unfolded the note. He held it out for us to see. It was written in black marker, all caps. Keep your head up, keep your eyes forward, and don't let go. I thought maybe you could use it more than I could, Rose said. Besides, everyone knows origami wombats are good luck. A wombat, huh? I said. Rose nodded. Durr, she said to me. What else would it be? As usual, I didn't have an answer, but I didn't mind being durred by Rose anymore. Some things just take time to get used to. I caught a glimpse of Wolf in the mirror, stuck to his locker, maybe a little misty-eyed, the three of us standing behind him. You don't have to go, Dee Dee said, saying out loud what we'd all been thinking. No, I don't have to, Wolf answered. Then he stuffed the wombat in his pocket and softly closed the door. The invitation. Wars should teach you things. Though, judging by how many humans have had, we must be terrible students. Not me, though. I learned more in the 2 weeks following the first Post-it note than I did in the 2 years of middle school leading up to it. Like, you should maybe put your dirty laundry in a basket because you never know when a girl's going to come along and see your underwear lying in the middle of your floor, and that there are better ways to let your emperor know he's being a jerk than stabbing him 23 times. And that people who get embarrassed by other people who laugh or sing too loud just don't have the guts to laugh and sing out loud themselves. And you can't have it both ways. The road forks sometimes, and you have to choose. Just pick the path that looks the least perilous and watch out for the trees on your way down. And you can't be friends with everyone. And even the friends you do make won't always last forever, which really sucks. But as my mom would say, that's life. And finally, if you can't say anything nice, like not a single thing, then maybe you should keep your big trap shut. But if you do have something nice to say and you feel a little awkward saying it, you can always write a note. There were a lot of changes after Wolf left. For starters, there was a new policy on phones. Too many complaints flooding in from parents and students both, so the administration decided it was a fight that just wasn't worth winning anymore. The new policy stated that students could bring their phones into school but had to keep them in their lockers. They still weren't allowed in class. That didn't always work, of course, but for the most part, the students followed along, happy for a compromise. And the teachers looked the other way, provided you weren't sucked into the screen when you were supposed to be turned on to linear equations. I still didn't have a phone, so it didn't make a bit of difference to me one way or another. The phone policy wasn't the only school-wide change, though. As soon as Wolf transferred, the big ham promised to start a new program to help combat bullying and discrimination in school. I figured that just meant adding more brochures to the rack in the counselor's office, but Mr. Sword volunteered to be the program advisor, so maybe not. I told him I'd help however I could. He told me that 20 other students had already said the same thing. Post-it notes remained banned on school grounds. You could still find them sometimes attached to someone's binder or stuck to the side of the toilet in the boys' room. I'm sure a few were still traded under the table, passed in secret exchanges in the halls, but for the most part you could tell they were done, especially since students could go back to texting each other between classes. The sticky note war, as it came to be called, ended the day we all used them to cover Wolf's locker. It's not covered anymore. Now it's just the newest looking locker in the school sticking out from all the rest. Don't get me wrong. The fighting wasn't over. The nudging and needling, the dirty looks and side-slung insults and behind-the-back tittering that still happened, though I'd like to think there was less of it than before. You couldn't go a day without hearing someone say, "Not cool, man," in response to an idiotic remark. Jason Baker got an especially cold shoulder from most of the student body, that is, once he returned from his 3-day suspension. He and Cameron Cole started skipping school a lot. I didn't miss them. Ask most of the students about it, and they'll tell you that the whole Post-it note thing was just a fad. They won't remember half the things they wrote, though they probably remember everything that was written about them. They certainly couldn't tell you who started it. Ashley R., probably, or somebody on the basketball team. Just don't ask Dee Dee. He'll tell you he personally instigated World War III. We were a triangle now, at least at lunch. The week after he emptied his locker, Wolf transferred to St. Simon's, the perfect K-12 school that was probably more than his parents could afford but was worth it in the long run. It was Wolf's call. His parents ultimately left the decision up to him, and he didn't ask to borrow Dee Dee's dice to make it. I think he'd been wanting to go for a while. He just needed a nudge. On paper, at least, it looked like an easy decision. St. Simon's had a 97% college admittance rate, but that wasn't why he wanted to go. They also had an excellent music program with a jazz band and orchestra and everything. They were just as eager to have Wolf join them as he was there to go, apparently. Probably so. After all, there was a few good things Wolf was leaving behind. I started sitting with Sean Fawcett on the bus, the kid with the crazy curly hair. His stop was before mine in the morning, so he saved me a seat. In all honesty, it was more like a third of a seat, but that was all right. Turns out Sean was a writer too, short stories, mostly in the fantasy genre. He let me read a few, and I had to admit they were pretty good. I mean, Sean was no George R.R. Martin, but I could see the potential. Dee Dee had lent me Game of Thrones. I kept it under my bed next to my poems. He was right. It was thoroughly educational. After I read his first story, I asked Sean if he ever played Dungeons and Dragons. He looked at me like I was nuts. To each their own, I told him. We still played, Wolf, Dee Dee, Rose, and me, just about every weekend, and even after everything that happened, Dee Dee was still Dee Dee still kept his 10-sided die in his pocket and used it to calculate the odds that somebody would trip at the cafeteria and bury their face into their spaghetti, but he also insisted I go with him to the restroom every time. And that Rose guard the door. We always went right before lunch, which was still the best period of the day, even though there was only 3 of us now. Bench still sat with his football buddies. Occasionally, he'd look over at our table and wave. If I noticed, I made sure to wave back. The third day without Wolf, I got my food and sat between Dee Dee and Rose. We had plenty of room to stretch out, but he tended to scrunch together anyway, taking up only half the table. Did you talk to Wolf last night, I asked, find out about his first day at St. Stuffy's went? Rose nodded, taking a bite of her peanut butter and banana sandwich, prime mouth roof spackling material. Yeah, she said, through a mash of PBB. He said it was all right. They have uniforms, apparently, and 3 times as much homework, and everybody knows everyone else, so it's obvious when you come in right in the middle of things. Rose would know. She was no stranger to starting over. Did he make any new friends? It's only been 1 day, Frost, Rose said, but yeah, he said he met some nice people. That's good, I said, and I meant it, though I felt an ache. It wasn't jealousy exactly, though I felt an ache. It was like a part having to share. I guess I wasn't sure I wanted Wolf to have a whole new set of friends yet. I didn't want him to forget us, but I understood. You find your people. I wondered what they would call him. Maybe he'd try to pull off Amadeus this time. Or maybe he would just be Morgan. With us, he would always be Wolf. Rose punched my shoulder. Apparently, I'd been staring off into space. Earth to Snowman! Come in! Snowman! Look, I made you something. Okay, head over to Schoology and answer the discussion question.